Okay, so today on the income flip, we've got Mike Mannino from Columbia, South Carolina. Welcome, Mike, to the income flip. How you doing, brother?
Thank, thank you very much for having me, my man. I'm doing very well.
Awesome, awesome. We were chatting it up a little bit beforehand, just laughing. We have some friends that we just helped do some pretty monstrous wholesale deals, and we're like, we've spoiled them for life. They'll never want everything else. They're going to turn their nose up on. But um, but listen, what I want to do is I want to get into really learning more about your journey, your story. Um, I, on the income flip, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help people escape the rat race, right? Help people understand how to flip their income from active income to passive income, and so I believe that people learn through stories first and foremost. And so I was reading a little bit about your story and working at McDonald's at age, what was it, 16? And I
Yeah,
think that's
16.
that's when it hit you, right? So let's start back then. What, 16? You're only like, that was only like 2 years ago, right, for you?
Yeah, it was 3 years ago. No, yeah. So I was 16 years old, and I was working at McDonald's for $6.55 an hour up in Michigan, where I was born. And which is kind of funny. So one of my friends brought up, like, wasn't the minimum wage like 7.25? I was like, I don't know what it was, but I definitely got paid 60.55 an hour. I know that, man. I promise you. And then I Googled it, and if you are under 18, you are legally allowed to be paid 20% under the minimum wage. So McDonald's, as a capitalist company, paid me like 20% less than that, like 7.25 number, whatever it was. And yeah, so I made 6.55 an hour working at McDonald's, and which was great. I'm very blessed. Um, I worked 20 hours a week, which was also the legal limit you're allowed to work while you're going through school. So I was in school 35 hours and then working 20 hours a week, because I had to pay for my car, my gas, insurance. I had a girlfriend. So then, like, all my money was gone, right? Once you have a
Hmm.
girlfriend. So,
Hmm.
um,
Mike,
yeah, so go ahead.
not a lot of people take on that level of responsibility at 16. Where did that come
Yeah.
from?
So, very good question. I will say that's from mindset. Mindset's the biggest thing in success and everything. So, at 13 years old, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which, if you don't know, it's kind of like an ulcer in your stomach. And I was taking 16 pills a day. I was like in pain all the time. I lost a ton of weight. And then I had to go on steroids for 6 months and I gained a ton of weight. And I'm not a tall guy, so it didn't look good on me, right? I look like Pillsbury Doughboy. And and I took from that lesson in life was the best blessing I've ever received, because it really at a young age made me appreciate life, and that to realize it's very valuable. Because at 13 years old, you can like break your leg and then go run the next week, right? You're like a
Hmm.
Wolverine at that
Hmm.
at that age. So I realized that life is very delicate, and I was blessed, extremely blessed. I give this all to God. And from 13 to 16, I was going through that whole thing. And then from 16 years old till now, I've been in remission. I haven't taken medication. I haven't gone to the doctors. I have zero symptoms of having Crohn's disease. And I really believe it's through mindset of believing I was healed, and working out and eating right and doing all the things you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
So going through that experience, I took life very serious. Um, and that's where it's guided me to, working at McDonald's at 16, and then 17, I'm bussing tables, 18, I'm waiting tables. Like, I'm just constantly working to achieve my goals.
Mm. Mm. So it sounds like you were working for something too, right? Like you realized life's fragile. I want to get after it. But I assume that you probably at 16, 17, 18, like you probably had, you're working and you're making money. So you're probably thinking, I, I, I have some goals that I want to do, right? Like what were some of those initial goals? I know in the beginning it was like, I just got to pay for my girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
But at 17, 18,
Mhm.
19, like what were some of those realizations?
So I had to pay for everything, which I believe was the best blessing my father gave me. He's a construction worker, so it's not like he had a ton of money, but I'm sure he could have helped me out, buy a car, put me through college, but he didn't, which was great because I had to pay for my community college, and I knew
Mhm.
that. And he wanted me to go to college. So I had to pay for the community college, pay for the car. And I also did have the goal of this was back in 2010 when all this was going on. Michigan got hit really hard from the recession, from the big
Mhm.
three. My father was in construction, and guess what? That really got hit hard because he did like really nice woodworking in houses, custom woodworking. And that was one of the first things to go.
Mhm.
So during that time, he bought a few rentals, I think two or three, and then he had me go in there for $10 an hour during the summer. And I was going in there and I'm slinging paint and doing drywall and fixing them up. And I saw him kind of turn that into, and then turn them into rentals. I was like, you know what? Like, I want to do this, right? Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to work for the rest of my life for someone. And I don't want to work minimum wage because I'm realizing even living at home, working minimum wage, I didn't have any money. I was like, I don't
Mhm.
know how you could afford to do this, paying rent, having kids, a family, health insurance, all those expenses. It just seemed impossible to me. So I just knew at that age, like I have to do whatever it takes to become successful.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that's such valuable, as a as a parent. Um, it is a dangerous thing if you give your child too much, right, early on. It is a blessing if they're like, listen, you got to go out there and just kind of make it happen. So for all you parents out there, I've seen it over and over again. You if you give them too much, it's just hard for them to feel like they've earned anything along the way. Like I assume, Mike, you probably feel like you earned everything you have. That there's this
Yeah.
sense of satisfaction and deep pride, I'd imagine.
And it was funny. So my first car was a 2004 Malibu, gold, rusted out, no horn, no AC. And my car was the cleanest car of all out of all my friends because it was my life savings at that point. At
Mhm.
16, I worked, in the summer, work with my dad at construction, work making $20 a day, whatever it was. And I saved, birthday money, Christmas money. And this was my 16 years of living, pride and joy. And, it looked gross, but it was like meant the world to me.
Mhm. So but let's bring us a little bit to where you are today, and then I'm going to go
Mhm.
backwards, right? What does your business look like today? You're no longer in Michigan. You're in South
Yep.
Carolina, right? You made the move. I assume you made the move because it was just cold as hell in freaking Michigan, right? Um, but yeah, actually, what was the actual reason? Was it that or was it something else?
Yeah, so it's funny. I had a few things. It was really the cold. Everyone in the Midwest dreams of moving south, and the one thing that holds them back is family. So I just dragged my family with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was really the cold, and then honestly, some of the politics in Michigan, where my business got shut down for 45 days during COVID. It was a legal $1,000 during that 45-day period, and I hold a grudge. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I separate myself from that state.
Eh, like you cut out just a little bit. I'm not sure if it was your audio or mine. I want to make sure everybody hears it. Like how
Mhm.
much, like during that time when you shut down, like what was the financial impact right there?
Yeah, so it's eight. So we lost $18,000 in those 45-day period because we had 10 or 11 houses. We got the
Hmm.
mortgages, non-homestead property taxes, lawn,
Hmm.
utilities, and our contractors can't look at them. It was illegal for the houses that were ready and for sale for people to go look at them. So we lost $18,000 in 45 days,
Mm.
and yeah, it's not fun.
Did you sell them and then move down to South Carolina, or like explain that whole
So
process?
good question. So we actually still have our flipping company up in Michigan. So
Mm.
I've been down here for over a year. I still buy, fix, and flip houses up in Michigan. I just don't go see them anymore. So we do about 20 a year typically. I think this year we'll probably do around 15 houses this year. And what I did for that company is I actually brought on a partner last April, and he's my boots on the ground. So he's the one looking at the houses, taking photos, and doing all the running around. And I have Olivia, who's my office manager. She does all the paperwork, deals with the title companies, the lenders, and all the documents, lists the houses, like all that. So we're blessed. We have a really good system. We have 3 crews that we use, and we're just constantly rotating houses up there. And I literally spend 5 hours a week on that business right now, and I'm able to now go travel, the world and live wherever I want. And So that's where that business is at right now.
Mike, awesome. And we're gonna unpack that a little bit. I love it, man. So cool. Um, you said that's where that business is right now. So what
Mhm.
other businesses do you currently have?
So I also buy multifamily and self storage facilities, like we kind of talked about a little bit earlier before this call. So I have 60 apartment rentals, half in Michigan and the other half actually in North Carolina, 35 units there.
Mhm,
And we've started that business, I think, in 2020, right after COVID as well.
mhm,
Because again, I realized then I knew like if your business gets shut down, like your income turns off, you need something to take care of you. You know, I'm a
mhm,
young guy and Social Security is not going to be there to take care of me, I'm assuming, right?
mhm.
Like, so I need to create my own retirement account. So we started moving into multifamily, which is basically just like fixing and flipping houses, just units in a little bit larger scale. Um, and then I also have an education business helping people fix and flip houses.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay, let's go back in time. Um, so as you started seeing this business through your dad's lens, right? Like your dad is saying, "Hey, come help me out," and you're like, "Okay, I want to do this." What was the first step where you decided, "Okay, I want to walk people through the mental steps," right? Like I'm going to start this business, and I'm going to focus on this particular asset class, and and I know a lot of us sometimes in the beginning would just like do shit, right? But I want to understand. I want you to unpack the thinking, how you structured it, and you did a lot of it. I would imagine in the beginning yourself, and then you probably brought on people. So let's kind of walk through that journey.
Yeah. So um, I'll just kind of real quick. So how it, in my teens, in the summer, I'd work with my dad, I'd flip, or we'd fix up those rentals. He had like three rentals from that, and I learned that skill set, and then also like the wealth appreciation if you hold those. Um, So that was the bug that bit me. 19 years old, I actually bought my first house with no money from my father. I had $14,500 saved. I got a FHA loan with 3.5% down. So I wrote a check for $7,500 and I got a house. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was a 3 bed, 2 bath house. And I fixed up the house while I lived there. And I did house hacking before I knew what it was. I
Hmm.
rented out the other 2 bedrooms to people who were waiting tables with me for $300 a month each, and my mortgage was only six. So do the math. Like I'm 19 years old, they're paying my mortgage, I'm paying a third of utilities, going to community college, waiting tables. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Um, 3 years later, I sold that in 2015 for 147,000. So I had like a $65,000 check. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm rich. Um, because I was making $18,000 a
Of
year at
course,
that time, so
I
that was like
totally
three
get it.
years of income.
So much money. It's still a lot of money, but yeah, I get it, especially with where you're at. Very cool.
um, so I moved back home with mom and dad, and within 30 days, I bought another foreclosure um, for 50,000. I bought it. It was a tax foreclosure in Michigan. You couldn't see the inside because it was occupied, so I didn't know what I was buying. I was freaking out. I just saw the outside. I was like, okay, well, there's 4 walls. That's all I know. But I'm like 50,000. I'm like, well, worst case scenario, I'll live in it. Like I'll fix it up. Like I can claw my out of any hole I put myself in, so I can figure this out. So it's kind of funny. My father didn't want me flipping houses. He saw me do it with my house personally, and he's like, Mike, like I don't think this is, replicatable. A lot of people try to do this. I don't think you should try it. I was like, well, I'm young. Worst case scenario, go broke when you're 20.
Mhm.
So I bought the house. I partnered with my father. I said, we bought the house at $10,000 left to my name. The house wasn't in too bad condition. Said, Mike Senior, you got the construction knowledge. You have 2 3 guys who work with you. How about they come in, they do the work, you fund the rehab, which was like 35,000, and then we split it 50-50. He's like, all right, cool. And we bought it. We renovated it, sold that for 140 grand, and made like another like 60 grand. I was like, okay, so like
Your dad's now getting hooked.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and I'll say, like, mindset. in the beginning I said mindset, and two, with that, if you have big goals, I set out really big goals. So in 2017, my goal was to retire my father. I love him to death, and he did construction. So he would come home, he's in his early 50s, 4:30 in the afternoon, because he leaves the house at 7 in the morning, and just boom, just like comes on the couch and just like falls on the couch, and like he's just like dead. Right.
Mhm.
And I realized you don't have till 65 years old. You can't. I'm like, he cannot physically do this at 60, 60 years old, right? And he's a great father. So I said, all right, if I will do all the work, I will work 70 hours a week. I don't care what it takes. But if you make $100,000 a year with me, which is more than what he was making, and you only work 20 hours a week, you just part time, and you just drive around in the car, and you check out the projects and just project manage, like that is my goal. And he's like, all right, whatever. I'll agree to this crazy bet. And then, and I was like, I'll do this in a year. I'll do this in 1 year. And he's like, okay, whatever. It took 2 years. So we retired him in 2019 to get to that point. But that was my goal. And I would say that's a great secret hack for everyone who's listening, is to set goals outside yourself to help
Mm,
and impact
mm.
someone else. Because if my goal was to make 100,000 a year for myself, I would have worked hard and it would have been nice a goal to hit. But when you want to help someone else, you will work harder. You'll get up early without an alarm clock, work later, and do whatever it takes to help another person.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Yeah, I love that. So you decided to move, right? You said earlier, all the family, right,
Hmm.
with you to Colombia, right? You're like, let's
Yeah.
all get out of Dodge, right? So a year and a half ago, you guys went down there. You kept
Yep.
your fixing and flipping business. You have a partner that's
Hmm.
there, right? Along the way, you've been buying assets, both storage and multifamily, right? Where do you think you want to take this, right? Well, actually, before I even ask that, right, let's go back. In order to build a business that requires, 14, 15 transactions a year, right, fixing and flipping, you need some systems, especially if you're going to
Hmm.
do it from afar, right? So why don't we unpack some of the systems that you had to develop in order to make that happen?
Very good question. So one of the funny stories, our second flip didn't go so well.
Hmm.
I was 2 for 2, right?
Hmm.
So our second flip, we walked through it, and I'm like, Dad, how much is it going to cost? You're the construction guy now. Now we're like, I'm confident. Like, how much is it going to cost to renovate
Yeah,
this
you're
house?
like experts. You guys are
Yeah, we're
experts at this
experts
point.
now. This is my third house. I'm an expert. How much is it going to cost to renovate this house? He's like, 15,000. I'm like, okay, 15,000. So a light rehab. So I like do my calculation. I'm like, all right, cool. The house works at 15,000. And then at the end of the project, we put $45,000 into the house. And I was like, no. I was like, the deal didn't work at 45,000. What? And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know. Like, he just kind of guesstimated. I was like, okay. I was like, we can't guesstimate anymore. Because, the nice thing with real estate, you can pretty much come up with the end value of the house once it's ready, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Especially in Michigan, 1,000 square foot house, we sell them for around 200,000. So I'm like, okay. So the only um, variable is like really the renovation cost. Like that's your margins, that's everything, right? So what, like you said about systems, what I did, and I spent thousands of hours of my life and tens of thousands of dollars with a developer. I created a 350 line Excel spreadsheet of all the products we use from Home Depot,
Hmm.
broken out from material to labor cost. So I know the exact cost for every single product we put in our house. So for an example, like a kitchen cabinet, on average, you pay $175 for a white shaker style cabinet from Home Depot, and we pay $50 for the labor. So each cabinet's $225, material, labor. You got 10 cabinets, that's $2,250. You
Hmm.
see where I'm going with this? And I broke them
Hmm.
down: doors, trim, paint, every single thing. So then it takes the guesswork out. So now we have this database of 80 houses we've done, and I know exactly how much I spent to the penny on every single one. And I can even fill out the sheet beforehand. And like I could spend a couple hours filling it out beforehand and get to like a 90% accuracy about house is going to cost. So that allows me, that saves so much time. And we do the same thing with our products. All of our products are listed out for our contractors. So there's no guesswork. We don't do HGTV flipping, unfortunately. I've taken the systems from McDonald's. If you go to McDonald's, you get a Big Mac. It's the same Big Mac, the same, I built them, right? It's the same everything. You go anywhere in the country, it's the same Big Mac. Same with our houses. They all look the same. We use the same product. So that saves so much time because we don't have change orders. There's no guesswork. The contractors know exactly which product to get at Home Depot. And I have it on the sheet. If this one's out of stock, get the second one. And they know exactly. So it allows David now, who's our boots on the ground, he really checks on the projects once a week. And he's just taking our guys out to coffee and lunch because they know exactly, you just give them an address and we know in 4 weeks what the house will be done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I would imagine now that you've done that many renos in your area and you know what it cost, right, per cabinet door and all the rest, that you could just break it down to a per square foot number, right, for the type of rehab that you have. You're like, hey, per square foot of living space, this is what it's going to, this is what it's going to cost me, give or take, with a 8 to 10% margin of safety. I would imagine, right? Like you still break it down line item by line item. I would imagine you probably just know the dollar per square foot.
Per square foot. Yeah. So our average cost is about $35 per square foot, like on a 1,000 square foot house, and then a roof or windows are additional. But why we break this out? Because actually our contractors fill it out. This is how they get paid. So they fill out the sheet of everything they did. We only pay for the work that's completed. We don't pay for anything up front. We used to pay them hourly. So this is how I learned and I got burned.
This is
right?
Great.
Yeah. He just laughed. Yeah. So again, like, it's funny, like, your first 10 flips, you learn a lot. I think it's like my fifth one, I come in and I'm living at home with mom and dad. I'm trying to retire my father. I'd have no money. All my money's into these projects. I'm not making any money because I just keep reinvesting it. I walk in, one of the contractors is sitting on a paint bucket, smoking a cigarette and scrolling through Facebook, making $45 an hour. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, get off your butt, get working. Like, what are you doing? Right. So I was like, again, like I need something that's more scalable than the guesswork. And by doing this, actually our guys, it took our average rehab from 8 weeks to 6 weeks. We saved 2 weeks per rehab because our guys actually make more money because now they show up instead of hourly, they're incentivized to work slower. Now they're incentivized to work faster because I'm like, all right, we need 1,000 square foot of LVP flooring, luxury vinyl flooring. We pay you guys $1.50 a foot to install. It's $1,500. How long will it take? 2 guys, a day and a half. Cool. You want to make $1,500 in a day and a half? Let's go. So now they're showing up early, staying late, and the money.
So you pay them per essentially little project within the house, like, right? Like, so you'll set, so if I understand correctly, it'll be like, okay, here's what the install of the kitchen cabinets, once those are done, this is what you get paid. The flooring in the basement, once that gets done, you get paid. So you paying them, like, what's the pay cycle look like for them? It's just like when they get the project done, or are you doing this like a 2-week thing, right?
Good question. So at first, and where I learned all this from is like I was an auto tech for like in high school, and I don't know anything about cars, but there's a book, right? There's a book that breaks out everything. So I learned like, hey, if you have to change your blinker light fluid on your car, and it's going to take 1 hour for them to do it, they charge $80 an hour. It doesn't matter if they take 5 minutes or 5 hours. You're only paying as a customer for that 1 hour of labor. So that's what I did for houses. I took that same concept and did for houses. So to go back to your question of how we pay them, at first, when our contractors new with us, we were paying them like, hey, once all the materials are here, we'll reimburse you for the materials, like once they're all in the garage, and then, pay structures like that. Now, honestly, it's kind of funny. We usually do like 2 draws with our guys. One of them we do 1. He's like, just pay me at the end. I'm like, okay. So usually it's like, maybe 3 weeks in, hey, the materials are half of the project's done. We write them a check for half of it, and then the other half when it's done.
Got it. So you just pay them, for the work that's finished. um, but you are only paying them 2 times at most during the course of the
Hmm.
project. Got it. Okay. I thought maybe you were doing some kind of piecemeal throughout where, like, at
No,
the end of 2 days, you're paying them for these
no,
this
no, that'd be complicated.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be complicated. Okay, good clarifying question on my part. Um, so that fixing and flipping side helps you generate kind of like what I call your active income, right? How do you think about that? And then how do you think that plays into the rentals that you're buying, right? What's that thought process there?
Yep. Very good question. You know exactly kind of the setup for it. So you always have a money problem. Just when you don't have money, you have a money problem. And then once you start creating money, Uncle Sam wants half of it. Um, so I got into multifamily for three reasons. One was for depreciation. There's something called a cost seg. It's a beautiful thing we're allowed to do. And basically depreciate the building instead of over the 27 and a half years cycle, we can take it all in 1 year. So for example, we bought a property last year and I'm able to depreciate $75,000 off of my active income of flipping houses for buying this apartment building.
Mhm.
So um, it's kind of nice. Actually, I just found out today, like I actually get a refund because I've bought so many last year in 2022. I have so much depreciation to show that I'm not going to be paying much income taxes or as much. So that's number one of the reasons. And then number two is the passive cash flow. Like I said, like, when I want to retire, right? And I don't want to have to keep fixing and flipping houses because that's like an active. I want something more passive. And that's a great long-term passive way to generate wealth. And number three is the wealth appreciation, literally making money while you sleep. It's like built into real estate, especially like apartments, how they're valued. It's like on my units that are $1,000 a month. Next year, if I raise the rent to 1,025, they don't think anything of it. But when you have 100 units, I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in value add to the property's value
Mhm.
just by $25 a month increment. So that is just kind of built in into multifamily.
So what then got you interested into storage? I'm curious. Were you like, okay, tenants, toilets, headaches, right? Management, storage, no tenants, no toilets. Like what was it? Was it that or was it that you have a friend or how did you get involved in storage? Curious.
Yeah. So actually, my friend invited me on a self storage facility, or he wanted me to look at it. Actually, he wanted me to look at the self storage facility he was buying up in Michigan. It was, and I look at self storage and multifamily kind of the same. Like it's just for those you can get the depreciation, the passive cash flow, and the wealth appreciation along with it. And it wasn't for the reasons of like no toilets and tenants or whatever. Like I don't mind it, to be honest. I'm not the property manager, so it's not a big deal to me. Um, but I had someone who invited me on a project, and he was buying 200 units in a town of 3,000 people. And we're looking at the numbers. And I'm like, do you really want to put, it was $850,000 and it was 60% occupied. And of those 60%, 60% were paying. So it's really like 40% were
Mhm.
actually paying. And I was like, okay. I was like, there's no website, there's no signage, all that. We can do all that. But the issue is there's only 3,000 people. And everyone here has like a half acre of a yard at least. I'm like, they can just put their stuff in their backyard, put a tarp
In a
on it.
pod.
Like
Mhm.
it's rural. It's a rural area. So I'm like, they don't really need us. So he almost walked away from the property after going through this. He's like, you're right. I was like, what? I was like, well, I've wholesaled single family houses. Every once in a while, we'll wholesale one that doesn't make sense for a flip. It's like, I've never wholesaled commercial. Let's see if we can do this. Long story short, 4 weeks later, we're at a closing table. We have someone who is buying it for $1,050,000, and we were paying $850,000. We did a double close, so we bought
Mhm.
it in the morning and sold it in the afternoon. And there's a $200,000 spread after the closing costs and everything is $180,000, and we split up three ways. I was like, sweet. I'm like, And that's what got me really juiced up about multifamily and self storage, because it's the same thing. It's the same act. It's a closing. It's the same paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more zeros at the end. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
have to flip a lot of houses up in Michigan to make $180,000,
Mm-hmm.
right? I have
Mm-hmm.
to probably flip, 6 houses, 7 houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe on average. So I'm like, oh, like that's kind of like when the light bulb went off for it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Like I have a lot of friends of mine, a lot of friend of well, one friend in particular that buys commercial, just all commercial, like large commercial. It's like, Rob, it's the same game. It's just like a hell of a lot more zeros, right? And I think that mentally, sometimes people have to take that leap. They have a hard time. It's identity. It goes back to kind of like their identity, self worth. Like they don't see themselves doing that for whatever reason, right? Have you ever, because you sound like a big mindset guy, right? Like, have you ever been playing around with your thinking around that? It's like, okay, great, I'm doing, $1 million deal. What about a $10 million deal? What about
Yeah.
$100 million deal? Right?
Hmm.
And when you start throwing those numbers out there, you're like, oh, well, maybe I can't do that. And the truth is, you can, right? It just kind of comes down to your thinking and what you let yourself think. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm curious if you've thought of that or contemplated that at all, right?
Yeah, so it's funny. You would think, so I'm no like Superman. I'm not like, I'm human. I deal with all those same struggles everyone deals with. So it's kind of funny. Like when I first in 2020, we bought our first 6 unit apartment building. I've done 40 flips by this time, right? Single family flips. You'd think, like, you think I wouldn't be scared of a 6 unit, but I was. I was terrified. I was like, I don't, because I don't know what I don't know. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
because now this is considered commercial. The debt is it's value
Mm-hmm.
different. The debt, like it's a new world, and it's a little 6 unit. Now I'm kind of laughing at it, but back then I was like petrified. I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? So what I did to offset the risk is I partnered with someone who had 40 units already.
Mm.
And I said, his name's Adam. I was like, Adam, like, look at this deal. Does it look good? He's like, yeah, it looks good. I was like, all right, I'll give you like majority of the deal. I gave him 60% of the deal. If you just make sure I don't mess up. Like I already found the deal. I negotiated it. I already have seller financing. You and I will split the down payment. And you kind of help manage it and make sure we don't mess up. And he's like, great. So it was like a win-win for him. It was easy. We actually sold that deal this year and made like 160 grand on the property. And so it was like an easy thing for him to do. So, and it offset my risk and I wasn't as scared, if that makes sense.
I love that story for a couple different reasons. One, it shows that you don't have ego around that, right? Some
Oh yeah.
people are like, I'm just going to pretend that I know everything. I'm going to and I don't want people to know that I'm vulnerable and that I'm potentially scared about it, right? But it's true. It's like there's a level of fear that happens in all of these, and you're wise, especially being at the age you're at, to be like, listen, I don't know what I don't know, and like let me bring in somebody that does, and I don't want to make a big mistake. Like if I can not do that, it sounds like you've done a good job of protecting your downside. It sounds like you have a good, healthy respect for money, right? That
Yeah.
that's
I,
that
yeah.
that's an important trait.
So I grew up in the 2008 recession. I was in high school. Like my father, thankfully, didn't, all his friends were losing everything. Um, we had our house for sale at a point. Like he had the rentals for sale and his house for sale. It's like whichever one goes first, we're going to sell our house, move in a rental, whatever it is, because his money dried up. So I am very blessed again, like for growing up in that environment, because I do have a very healthy respect. I always think, what happens if the world ends tomorrow? Like in
Hmm.
2020, my business did shut off. I lost, that $18,000 in 45 days, where like everything just stopped, came to a halt. So I live way below my means, and risk mitigation is like, I joke around in our company. I'm like the risk mitigator for that. So
No, that's great. There has to be a risk mitigator, like in every organization. So just so I understand, the team today is you, the boots on the ground, right? sounds like an operations person.
Hmm.
Is that correct? So there's just three of
Yep.
you in the business?
Yeah, so correct. And then Mike Senior, who's now retired because his job was to drive around. David took it, so he's on Social
Yeah.
Security, whatever it is. But
So there's four of you, and he's
he's
like
on a pension.
yeah, he can jump in whenever you need him
Exactly. Yeah,
potentially, right?
he's been in construction forever. So if David has a question, he jumps in and answers it. So
That's cool.
so yeah, and that's really it on that side of the business. It's a really small team, not a lot of overhead.
Well,
Because
that's my point. Like what I want people to hear is that you can run an incredibly profitable business with not carrying a lot of overhead because I assume you don't have like a fancy office and you're paying like a ton of rent. But what are some of your biggest expenses? I'm just curious.
yeah, very good question. So uh, yeah, like you said, we don't have an office. We all work from home. Um, because me, David, and my father are partners, so we only get paid the nonprofit. The only overhead is Olivia, who's our office manager. And what I've done too, everyone in my company is incentivized, like my contractors, on performance. So Olivia has like a decent base, but then she has a huge upside. So she gets 1% of every house that we sell. She lists our houses,
Mhm.
and she crushed over six figures for the past 2 years by doing that. So our only overhead is her small base salary and marketing. We spend about $7,000 a month in marketing for discounted houses, and with her, I think it comes out to like our overhead is probably $120,000 a year, whatever it is, and we can turn off the marketing off at any time if we had to.
Low risk. I love that. Very cool. So where are you going to take it from here, Mike? Like you're a young guy, you've built a good foundation, you understand like the flow of money, right, in and out of a business. You have some assets that now you understand like what that means for you and your future wealth, right? Like what are some of the things that are important to you? I heard you say you travel, right? Like
Mhm.
how do you define freedom? Like what is or wealth? What does wealth mean to you? What does freedom mean to you, right?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I joke around and say, you're successful when you can wake up without an alarm clock,
Mhm.
right? Like you make your own schedule. So freedom and wealth to me is being able to live on my schedule. Like I don't have, a huge overhead. I don't have a big fancy house, which I love because it allows me, like my girlfriend and I, we traveled for 6 weeks during the winter. We were in Aruba and Florida and on a cruise, and I find like the cheapest cruise possible, and I sleep in the basement. And I'm like, we're here for $400 for a week. This is great. Like I love doing that and like making those memories. Like that is the ultimate freedom. Last year I took my mom to the Keys marathon in the Keys, Florida Keys. I called her. I was like, "Hey, mom, have you ever been to the Keys? I never took you, but I'll take you." So we just like drove down there, went down there for like 5 or 6 days, and had a blast with me, my girlfriend, and my mom. The ultimate joy and gift right there to give back to your parents and to be able to do what you want when you want. I don't think any car or house or whatever like can amount to that. So that's really what's important to me. My goals now are to take care of Olivia, my office manager, for her to make six figures every single year inside of our companies, and then like my keep my father retired. He can't go back to work, and then now it's also like helping people around me, like my students in my course, and networking and partnering with other investors. Like I've made it's pretty cool actually. I sat down and thought of this. Like I've made a handful of people $1 million, which is crazy to me.
Mhm.
And I've made dozens of people over $100,000, like
Mhm.
dozens. And I'm like, that is, and we were talking about this earlier before we jumped on the call. Like my friend Brandon, he, on one deal, he was able to leave his job. He made $250,000 on a wholesale deal, and he became a full-time real estate investor. Like, I think I have three people and working on the fourth one right now who have left their job and became full-time real estate investors. And I think that there's no greater joy than that.
Yeah, it's life changing. It's transformative. It, um, it's transformative. I actually wrote an email to everybody in the team this morning and just saying, what we do is transformative. Like it changes lives. right? And yes, it's real estate investing, but really what you're doing is you're teaching people how to fish, right? You're teaching people how to fish. You're teaching people how to think like a business person and entrepreneur, so you can decouple yourself from time and a wage, right? Because it's like, I can't think of a worse thing. Like, oh my God, I never want to be tied to that, right? Like, that's just crazy. I want to be rewarded for my efforts. And I think a lot of the anxiety and stress that people have in this world is because they feel out of control. They don't have control over, you know, their life. And yet you know this, right? Like the life of a real estate entrepreneur has its ups and downs, and it's scary. And sometimes you're like, how am I going to make payroll? And the government just shut everything down. I'm screwed, right? Um, and yet it's so rewarding, right? If you just keep pushing that forward. So, do you know if you want to take this more towards a coaching route eventually, or do you want to have you thought about what you want? I mean, you're a young guy, right? Like, who knows what the next 30, 40 years looks like for you, right? Um,
Yeah.
but have you given that some thought of where you think it might lead? Like,
Yeah. So I am focused on I only focus on things like, because there's like, a lot of opportunities, right? Like last April when I brought on David, I had a lot of time to kind of think like what I wanted to do. I started this coaching company last November, because I've been asked for years, like, Mike, can you help me flip houses? And I'm like, I would love to, but I'm feeding myself right now because I'm
mhm.
running my business. And so I'm just kind of right now answering the call of people asking for help in the fix and flip business. And and the cool thing is, I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to follow kind of some sort of similar journey as mine. Like when you get in real estate, you typically don't go to like buying multifamily apartments and self storage. You might go to like selling real estate, flipping houses, wholesaling, and then you get a little success. You got a little money in the bank. And then what do? You want to buy some multifamily, and then you want to buy some self storage. So I want to help people along that same journey. And then selfishly, I want to be a part of my students' deals. Like when they come across a multifamily or self storage facility and they're scared, and just like I did, I gave away equity on my first few deals because I didn't know what I was doing. And I want to be there to educate them, help them out if they need down payment, understanding the rehab costs, whatever it is, and just kind of be there along that journey. And I think that'll be a great way, a great mutually beneficial relationship to teach them how to fish, and then we can like sharing it together.
Yeah, what I hear, and you're on the right path for you, right? Because what I really hear is that you love serving other people. Like, that's what I hear. That's what I got out of this today, right? Like, whether it's your dad or Olivia or students, right? The overall theme is it feels empty to you to do it for yourself, but it feels super gratifying if you're doing it for other people. And so you're a good collaborator of that. Like and that ultimately is impact, right? Like I teach this 7 levels of wealth journey that we go on. At the very top is impact, right? You make impact all along the way, but when you really kind of understand the game that you're playing, like you could do impact at like just a massive level, right? And and level one, by the way, is mindset and identity and energy. And level two is like, how the hell do I make some predictable income? Like, you know how to flip a house, but how do you put five or six or seven or 10 or 11 or 12 right together? Like, you've got to get into like predictable income. Once you get into predictable income, you're like, well, shit, I don't know how to really run a business. Like, so you got to learn how to actually start running a business and setting up systems and processes. And once you do that, you realize, oh, like, I have the ability to really leverage this and get back my time, which is what you did, right? You started doing this, like, get back your time. And then level four is really, in my world, right? Uh, we buy investments all along, but it's when you start doing investments on purpose. You've got a really good hypothesis on like what you want your investment life to look like, and you do it on purpose. In the beginning, we're just doing shit to do shit because like we're trying to figure out, we're tasting things along the way to figure out what asset class is good for me, or what asset class works in my market, or because our market's all different, right? Level 5 is leadership. Level 6 is scale, right? Nobody needs to scale their business. Like there's some there's something very freeing about keeping your business to 3 people, 4 people, 5 people, and being able to just create real freedom. Like you could be in Hong Kong and you could wherever, right? When you build a really big business, sometimes like there's a piece in the middle of building that business where you are you might be free financially, but you're not free from obligation, right?
Yeah. And to add to that, it's funny. So I've been a part of many masterminds. It's kind of actually funny. I got it right here. Like, here's all the events I've been to, right, in
Oh
my life.
shoot.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is real. Like, this is like I spent 60,000 in education and for college. I spent over 100,000 in real estate marketing education. So, but I've seen more businesses go out of business by growing too fast and having too much
Mm-hmm.
overhead
Mm-hmm.
than not maybe having enough inside of these masterminds, because they see someone who I've met, multiple people. They flip 100 houses a year, and God bless them. They do a great job at it. But I understand the overhead. I talk to them that the marketing overhead, the employee overhead, all the overhead that they have. Like the second, like if they had that 45-day pause, if they're in my market had that 45-day pause, I mean, they would be. I mean, that could take down a lot of businesses right there. So, to what you're saying, I 100% agree. You don't need to scale to having all these employees and like all these. I think that's just like an ego thing. Like my first goal is to make $100,000 a year, and every year I pass that, I have like the biggest smile on my face, right? I mean, I'm like, well, past that now, but it's I think a lot of people also talk about gross income, and that's ego. They're like, we've made $2 million gross. Okay, but what's your net? And it's funny. Once I compare numbers to someone who flipped 100 houses and I do about 20, we actually have the same net income.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
Guys, I want everybody on this listening to this right now. It's like there's so much wisdom in what you're saying. And it's actually really refreshing because you are young, like and you get it. Um I've met lots of I'm friends with some of the biggest, you know, fix and flippers in our area, and I know their books, and we're friends, and I know what keeps them up at night, and I know if the market changes just 5%, 8%, it screws their business. And so a lot of them, scaling a fix. I want everybody here that scaling a fixing and flipping business um, is complex at scale because there's so many moving parts, right? And projects can get delayed super easy when you've got 40 projects on the books and there's a ton of slippage that happens. So you have to be an incredibly good operator, right? And what I see a lot of times people go through, like they wholesale, then they think that the next step is like fixing and flipping. And then sometimes they learn and they just go back to wholesaling because really at the end of the day, this is a sales and marketing business, right? You make a lot of your money on the initial acquisition. And yes, you realize it out when you fix and flip, right? You get the maximum that asset allows. But there's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying because ego drives so many of us. I'm going to put me in that bucket. Like I heard early on that you didn't have like a big ego. Like you're not afraid to go ask a friend for help, right? But I see a lot of investors that are like they just want more, right? It's like more. And I've interviewed a lot of people on this podcast that were like, yeah, more doesn't mean better. Like I had more, I was flipping 300 houses, 400 houses, and then I went bankrupt, right? And it really requires somebody to like deep check, like what is it they want? What do they
yeah,
actually want, right? Like, do they
that's
want to
it.
be able to travel and like, hang out and 6 months out of like whatever it is, right? It's different for everybody. Um, but that's why I wanted to find out like what wealth meant to you, and um, and I like that. I like what you said. Yeah, I like what you said. Well, what words of wisdom can we kind of wrap this up with, right? And by the way, if anybody wants to get a hold of you, um, what's the best way to reach you, right? Or if anybody would take any of your training, like what could
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah, so I have a free gift for everyone listening. If you want to get a hold of me, it's inside that gift. It's a free training video.
Mm.
So if you guys go to 55kdeal.com, so 55kdeal.com. So we made $55,000 on a house. So it's like 55K deal. And I show you guys how to find the deal, how I show you my standardized pricing sheet, how we estimate the renovation costs, the whole, and what we do to a house, what we don't do to a house, and why, like all the psychology behind that. So it's a free gift for you guys. It's a 20-minute video, free training. And inside of there, underneath, you can join my free Facebook group, the Real Estate Wealth Builders. We're also on Facebook, and I'm in there every day. I'm disciplined to once a day post in there. If you have any questions, you can post it. I will reply to it. Me or Olivia will reply to it and answer your questions and just serve you as much as possible. We also do every month. So maybe probably after this, when this recording's out, it's next week. But once a month, we do a free 3-day training. You know, how to find deals, how to finance your deals, and how to flip deals and renovate them. Because those are the 3 most common questions I always get, like how to find deals. I show you, I spent close to $800,000 in marketing. I'm going to show you all the things we're doing in our business, like what does work, what doesn't work. And then once you find a house, the dozen different ways you can finance a house, and then renovating, how I do this for apartment buildings, how I do this for houses. I show you guys all that as well. So it's really cool. I highly recommend checking that out. So the best way to get a hold of me is that 55kdeal.com. Check out that link, and I'll be inside that Facebook group.
Awesome. Mike, are you going to the Bigger Pockets conference next week by any chance? Have you ever
I
gone
am
to a
not
Bigger Pockets?
next week.
Okay.
I haven't been to Bigger Pockets. That's one I need to check out.
It's not a mastermind, right? And but it's a good community. I like those guys out there. We collaborate a lot with them, and we've got I think, in Orlando, 3,000 people, 3,000 investors.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good little conference for sure. They do it right, and they're good people. So, well, Mike, thanks so much for joining us on the income flip. I really appreciate it. 55kdeal.com. Check it out, everybody. And with that, we will see you next time.